Hey everyone, so today I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about some music theory, specifically a way to approach learning or composing with different modes. This is like a method or exercise or just kind of different way of thinking about modes that I think is different than how it's typically taught. And I think this makes it really so much easier for beginners to wrap their brain around how to use modes and what they sound like. I posted some videos about using the modes with the Moog subharmonicon in my tutorial series, and a lot of people asked for more lessons like that. So I wanted to go back to some of that theory. If you're new to this channel, I do a lot of videos on synths, modular synths. I've done a lot of videos on the Moog Sound Studio, and most of my videos are around the technical aspects of using those synths. But since people seemed interested in the theory discussions, I wanted to do a little bit of that too. So how I like to approach these things is I'll post a jam or some type of musical video, and then I often put those patches on my Patreon page or do a video for the public about them, about how I made that patch and how I created that song. So recently I just posted a jam where I actually used the Phrygian Mode. And so I want to explain a little bit about the theory and the process. So I'm going to do this in two videos. The first one is going to be focused all on the music theory. If you don't have the Moog Sound Studio, you'll still get a lot out of it. If you're new to modes, I think it's a great way to learn them. And the second video is going to be all about how to apply those concepts to the Moog Sound Studio and walking you through the patch that I made and how that composition kind of all fits in. So I hope all that makes sense. If you like this kind of video, please let me know in the comments section, because if there are lots of comments and people really dig it, then I'm going to make more videos like this. But all right, enough of that stuff. Let's head on over to my keyboard and we're going to walk through some modes. All right, so this is my M Audio Keystation 61. I've had this MIDI controller forever. This has been schlepped around to bars for gigs. It's been used in my home studio when all I had was a computer and a MIDI controller. This thing has just been awesome. It's been a workhorse. Every now and then I think about upgrading it because it's getting kind of old. It's big and it's even turning a little bit yellow, but it just still works and feels great. So that's what this is. So let's talk a little bit right from the beginning. What exactly is a mode? Well, a mode is just a scale. It can be used for a harmonic structure, just like a major and minor scale. Those are actually modes too. They are the Ionian and Aeolian modes. There are other variations of scales. Now, frequently when they're taught relative to one tonal center. So, for instance, if we stick with the key of C, we have our Ionian mode, or our major scale. And if we were to start on the second of that, D, we would get a Dorian mode. And if we go to E, it would be the Phrygian mode, the Lydian mode, Mixolydian mode, Aeolian mode, or just the minor scale, and then the Locrian mode. And then it would repeat back. And that's the way many of us were introduced to modes. And we memorize them as saying that the Dorian begins on the second of the major scale, the Phrygian begins on the third, and so on and so forth. I don't think that's the best way of approaching it, especially if you're a beginner and it makes sense just to hear what these differences are. So just like words and vocabulary, when you're super young, you might use words like happy and sad. As you grow up and build up your vocabulary, you start using more specific words. So rather than happy, you might use a word like content or ecstatic, elated. Those all mean different things, even though they're still happy. They're just sort of more specific. And it's the same thing with modes. You're going to build up your musical vocabulary so you can express a different emotion that's more specific to what you want to say. And just like with words, In order to truly understand what elated means, you'll have to compare that to content. And when you can juxtapose those, that's when it really starts to become meaningful. So I think a much better way to practice the modes and to learn the modes is rather than learning them relative to other modes, like as in D Dorian and C Ionian and G Mixolydian, it's to learn them all around one tonal center or one tonic. Let's take the Mixolydian mode, for instance. I've already established that that builds off of the G relative to C major. It's hard to hear the difference between those two different flavors of a major tonality when you're starting on different tonal centers. So I think it's important to learn how they fit over one tonal center. Now, if we look at the Mixolydian mode and think about how that differs from a G major scale, we notice that it's just that F sharp is lowered down 1/2 step. So the 7th is lowered down 1/2 step. Let's take that and put it with our C major scale. So here's C major. Now let's play the Mixolydian mode by lowering the 7th 1/2 step. I think it's so much easier to hear the difference when you play them next to each other with the same tonic. You can really hear that B flat ring out. Let's take a little melody, just so you can hear the difference between major and Mixolydian. If you take a little melody, something like that, over a major 7th, now let's do that in the Mixolydian mode. You can start to hear how Mixolydian feels a little bit more bluesy because of that dominant 7th in there. It's used in a lot of rock songs, whereas the major chord just kind of sounds more happy. But let's take this a little bit further. The reason Mixolydian has a major tonality is because the triad that's built on the tonic, the first triad, is a major chord. So if we look at C Mixolydian, it's a C major chord. So when you're comparing Mixolydian to something, you want to compare it to the C major scale. Lydian, Mixolydian, and Ionian are the major modes. Dorian, Phrygian, and Aeolian, or the minor scale, are the minor modes. So when we use those, we want to compare them to the minor scale. Because this composition that I'm going to be taking apart is in Phrygian, that's what I'm going to focus on right now. But this can really be applied to any mode, scale, whatever. So first, let's figure out what makes a Phrygian mode the Phrygian mode. So we know that it's built on the 3rd. So let's just go through the E Phrygian. Now, since it's a minor tonality, let's compare it to E minor. That's E minor. Now let's play E Phrygian. So the only difference is that F sharp is lowered 1/2 step. And in the Phrygian scale, that means that the 2nd is lowered 1/2 step. So let's change keys and go to A minor. Now let's play Phrygian by lowering the 2nd note 1/2 step. I'm going to play it back and forth a couple times. Now, if you're asking yourself, does that one note really make that much of a difference? That's a great question. And it kind of adjusted the flavor when you're just playing the scale up and down, and it changes the flavor a little bit if you're playing melodies. But where it really comes into play is when you're making a harmonic structure. And this is where I think this method gets really exciting and is kind of fun. It's a great exercise to do, even if you're already experienced, if you're ever in a rut with writing chord progressions or something, just give this a shot. So we're going to write in A Phrygian. Now we know that the second, this B flat, is the only difference between A Phrygian and A minor. So there's no rules with composition, but for this exercise, what I'm going to challenge you to do is to write and really emphasize that B flat. Because if you're emphasizing it, then that means your song or your composition, your melody, your whatever, is going to have a strong Phrygian tone to it. So let's first of all, let's make a four-chord chord progression in A Phrygian. The reason I'm choosing 4 chords is because that's nice and easy, but also because when we get to the part where we're going through the Moog Sound Studio, the subharmonicon has a 4-step sequencer, which we're going to use to play these chords. So the first one, in general, it's nice to sometimes just start with your tonic. So we're going to go ahead and choose A minor. Now let's think about what other chords use a B flat. Well, there's B flat, of course. There's G minor. There's E diminished. And there's C7. Now basically what I did was I figured out a chord where the B flat was the first note, was the root note. I figured out a chord where the B flat was the third, while still using notes of A Phrygian. Notice I didn't play like G diminished or F sharp major, because that wouldn't have fit in A Phrygian. But G minor does. And then E diminished is a chord that has the B flat as the 5th. And then C7 is a chord that has the B flat as the 7th. So that's going to be my palette of sorts that I'm going to use. Now we have 5 chords to choose from. Now, since I said I only wanted 4 chords, we got to eliminate one of those. This is, of course, where you start to get creative and it's all about taste, but I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the diminished chord. So now our 4 chords are A minor, C7, G minor, B flat. Now, out of those 4 chords, you can really play them all kinds of different ways and make really great compositions. For this, I'm going to choose A minor, C, G minor, B flat, if we look at how the roots of the chords play out, it makes sense. It's A, goes up a third, then it kind of repeats that, G, up a third. Now just listen to the difference between that chord progression if I were to play it in the same roots in A minor. And that just basically means moving that B flat up to B. It has a totally different sound. So just like when we were running scales, it didn't sound that different. Now that we have a harmonic structure, it sounds totally different. That diminished chord really, really makes it sound different. As opposed to the Phrygian mode. So when I recorded my jam video, I had some other sequence going. So let me explain that, and then we'll also make a little melody that wasn't in that jam video. So basically, I really wanted a simple sequence that emphasized that B flat and just the A Phrygian mode. So all it really was playing up the first 4 notes. And that's quite simply because the subharmonicon only has 4 notes on its step sequencer. And if you play that with the chords underneath, it sounds great. Now, another thing I did was on the Mother 32, I played the sequence is pretty much the same thing, but I also transposed it up a fifth because it stays within the Phrygian mode. But then the Mother 32 was harmonizing with the subharmonicon, which was playing these notes. And it still sounds great. So that kind of sequence fits with things like the Moog Sound Studio or modular or something with heavy sequences like that. But you could also make more traditional melodies that emphasize those notes. So just something like... I'm just sort of making this up right now. So what I was doing right there, I was actually just making that up on the fly. I probably should have put more thought into the video, but I thought it would be good to show a melody, and I hadn't prepared that. But because I had mentioned that this starts on the tonic and goes up a third, and then it sort of repeats that, I just sort of made a phrase over these two, and then repeated it, starting it from the next two. So it can be really simple. I can't remember what I did. Oh yeah. Let's actually emphasize that B flat. So, and the reason I'm landing on this, so that's the 5th of the C. So let's go. And then let's play that same melody or that same little phrase over G minor to B flat. And there you go. You have a nice little melody that's over a Phrygian harmonic structure. So back to the original exercise of how I think you should approach this and try learning some of these things. It's take whatever mode you want to learn and apply it over the major or minor scale, depending on if it's a major or minor mode, and really focus on the notes that change. And once you have the notes that are changed, figure out which chords have that note as its root, its third, and its fifth and seventh that fits within that mode. Once you have that, you'll have a nice palette of colors that you can make a harmonic structure out of. So I hope that makes sense. Just a quick review before I get into the subharmonicon patch. The chord progression I'm going to use is A minor, C, G minor, B flat. And here's the sequence in the right hand. And that's what I came up with before I made the patch, and that's pretty much the heart of it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like these types of videos, let me know what you think in the comments section. If you want to hear more and you thought this was confusing, let me know, give me some feedback. I really appreciate the feedback and suggestions. I hope you stick around for the next video where I show you how to do this on the Moog Sound Studio. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.